Moving to climate, former UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon says Australia is facing carbon tariffs for lagging behind on climate action. So this is punishment for Australia. It's coming. He reckons Australia is doing half as much to reduce emissions as other developed nations. I'd love to get a list of the developed nations he's referring to. It's a sentiment, of course, Matt Keane in New South Wales shares.
We need to have concrete plans to achieve these objectives. So, for example, in New South Wales, we've got a concrete plan in place that will ensure that when our existing sources of electricity generation come to the end of their technical lives, they're replaced with not only cleaner forms of electricity generation, but also forms that are cheaper and just as reliable. We've got a plan to do that.
James, why aren't the likes of Ban Ki-moon getting stuck into the top 10 major polluters of CO2, if indeed it is regarded as a pollution, in the world, like China, like India, like Russia, like the United States, instead of Australia, which is way down the list?
Yeah, I'm very glad you brought up China, and I think that clip just shows one of my favourite political sayings, which is if you ever find yourself agreeing with Matt Keane, pause for reflection. I'm glad you brought up China because IPA research has found that China just takes 16 days to emit as much carbon as Australia does in an entire year. So for Ban Ki-moon and for the UN and for all these other international organisations to continually point the finger at Australia and its inability to deal with climate change, point the finger to the elephant in the room, which is China emitting that much carbon. And until they do, I just can't take them seriously. I think they're just doing it for political reasons and not on an effort to save the planet.
On the pure gauge of building new coal-fired power stations, you won't see another one built in this country. Won't be approved. No politician will have the guts to do it. Bridget, have a look at what's being built in India and China. Don't tell me the developed nations are getting on board, reducing their carbon emissions. Come on.
Absolutely. They're focused on the countries. They think they can, finger wag into doing it. But what I'm always interested about with, politicians and these Australian lobby groups who want climate action, if you really wanted climate action, you wouldn't be turning to these international bodies like Ban Ki-moon and, with the UN and begging them for another media release to urge Australia into action. You would be going out and engaging with every Australian voter who have, in more than one election now, voted with their feet on this issue. The fact that they keep turning to these international bodies it speaks to the elitism that we often see in these cheer squads, rather than going to their neighbours, their friends, their colleagues, their fellow citizens who have all expressed views on this issue and in a democratic way that, and politicians are answerable to that. So if politicians want to talk about this, they shouldn't be talking to the UN, they should be talking to their voters.